Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I am going to continue my series of a deep dive into Adventures Dark and Deep. This episode I am going to do an overview of the player's manual chapter on character creation. And the reason why it's going to be an overview is because much of character creation here in Adventures Dark and Deep is is either a direct mirror of or recreation of AD&D First Edition with just some minor detail changes, and it's where those detail changes that I'm going to focus on. So much of it I will just gloss over, a very brief mention. And then other parts I will actually dig into a little bit deeper. Now, this section is a very large section of the player's manual, so it's about 80 some odd pages of content for character generation. And again, I'm just going to focus in on the parts that I think are most interesting or most important for you to know about. So without further ado, let me jump right into the Adventures Dark and Deep Player's Manual Character Creation. So here we have the Player's Manual. This is written by Joseph Block. If you're not familiar with Joseph Block is the Greyhawk Grognard. I really recommend that you go to his channel on YouTube. You also follow him on Facebook, Greyhawk Grognard, there on Facebook as well. He is probably he's probably the best at this moment, and really for quite some time now. Probably the best historian of Greyhawk, and I think that there's probably very few people left that have as much knowledge as he has. And that includes the people that actually worked at TSR during the years that Greyhawk was the official world setting. So he is an incredible resource for information about Greyhawk. And again, I highly recommend you go to his YouTube channel and his Facebook group, and also check him out on Drive-Thru RPG. You can find his materials under BRW Games, and there's a slew of stuff there as well. Just a real quick mention. I spoke to him 2 weeks ago at the Philadelphia Game Expo, and he mentioned that some of his products that are currently on Drive-Thru RPG are getting a facelift per se, so removing the OGL, and if that's a concern of yours, then I would just wait. I believe he said that's going to begin in March, so if you want to wait until March to start picking up some of his stuff, that might be advisable if you're concerned about the OGL being in the products or not. So anyway, without further ado, let's jump into the character generation or character creation. Now, as you can see, that starts on page 3 and it ends around page 86. So there's a lot involved here, and again, I am not going to focus in on everything. The forward. Bottom line is that this is a what-if product, right? So Adventures Dark and Deep is the what if Gary Gygax remained at TSR and remained at the helm of creating the next edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And so through, a copious amount of research, looking at Gary Gygax's writings, whether it be on Dragon's Foot or in the Dragon magazine and the Sorcerer's Scrolls sections of the Dragon magazine, and then looking at where certain aspects of AD&D First Edition found their way into Second Edition. Um, that's where Joseph took a look at it and said, but if Gary was still at the helm, this is what it would look like. And that's what this project is. So he declares that this is not a retro clone. It does not set out to recreate a particular set of rules from decades past, as do some other games. Rather, it is a new creation unique unto itself. It does not attempt to recreate any set of rules that has gone before. So it really is a more forward-looking game system than what you might attribute to a retro clone. So let's move on. I'm going to skip over the introduction. I'm going to go right to creating characters. So there are 5 steps to creating characters, and the first one is the ability score checks, right? Rolling for ability scores. Now the ability scores are going to be from 3 to 18. Ability score could be a 19 if the character race will allow for that, and racial modifiers allow for that, but otherwise 3 to 18, and it has your very standard methods of rolling that. So you can roll that 3d6 6 times, put them in order, or assign them. Method 2 is rolling 4d6, dropping the lowest. And then there is each player rolls the final third method, which is somewhat unique here, although it's probably been done elsewhere as well. Rolling 2d6 plus 6 6 times and keeping them in the order that they were rolled in. So that is somewhat unique. So once you've rolled your attributes, then you're going to choose your race. You're going to choose your class in step 3. You're going to determine your starting money in step 4 and equipment. I am going to not even address that during this particular video. And then you're going to add your finishing touches with your, eye color and height and weight and all of that stuff, right? And then populate your spell book and so on and so forth. I'm also not going to spend very much time with that here and now. When I do get to the magic section, I might talk about starting spell books, and that's when I will handle that. So strength, you have your strength ability scores that go from basically 1 to all the way up to 25. I have not done the comparison between this and AD&D First Edition chart, looking back and forth to see if it is a direct recreation of that. I'm going to lean towards that it is a direct copy, because when I look at 18-100 strength, plus 3 plus 6 is the same as there as well. Again, I'm not going to focus too much on these these ability scores and what they actually mean, because it's fairly uniform. Races. So let's go over the races, right? So character races. Each game setting will have its own details regarding which races are available to the player character. Some settings may allow races other than the ones detailed here. Some may not allow them, and yet others may change the nature and details of the races available. So it is very much up to yourself as a game master what you're going to allow, what you're going to disallow. The base rules here: you have dwarves, elves, gnomes, halflings, half-orcs, and humans. Restricted subclasses or subraces, optional rule. So you might have an option where you say, I'm not going to allow any subterranean races. So no gray dwarves, which are, Dwegar, no dark elves, which are drow, no deep gnomes, which I can't pronounce the name of that, that gnome thing without looking at it. I'm not looking at it right now. You might have no subraces, right? So you might choose not to have hill dwarves and mountain dwarves or whatever. You're just going to have a dwarf. You're not going to have a sylvan elf or a a wood elf or, whatever. You're just going to have the standard high elf or elf. Um, Gnomes, they have different varieties of gnomes. I know this book here details forest gnomes and hill gnomes, obviously. Halflings, and there are, stout and lightfoot and those, but you just might have halflings or half orcs or not have half orcs at all. It's really up to you. Here we have the age ranges of dwarves, and you go into the height and weight of dwarves. The only differentiation that I see between male and female is in the height, weight, and age categories. So you're not going to see that reflected in the attribute scores. And for many people, that is a big positive from AD&D First Edition, where that seemed to create a lot of contention. However, you do have class level limitations, and those are based on the ability score plus the race of the character. So you do have those limitations, and I'm going to take a quick break from looking at this here and talk to you directly about that limitation. So racial class level limitations are important to have in Dungeons and Dragons, particularly in advanced Dungeons and Dragons or old school Dungeons and Dragons, and here in Adventures Dark and Deep as well. In most cases, demi-human races come with a number of racial traits and abilities, modifiers that make them distinct from human characters. And that distinction is considered to be an advantage. All right, those cluster of skills and abilities are an advantage over what humans have. And so when Gary Gygax initially created these, for advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and he started modifying them and looking to see how it works, and this really does go back to OD&D when race was class in the older versions of Dungeons and Dragons. So you didn't play an elf fighter, you played an elf who had some fighter ability and some magic user ability, or you played a dwarf which had, dwarven abilities along with some fighting capabilities. But they were never able to get to the same levels that a human can do. A human has always been more adaptable, and thus they have no level limitation other than what might be tied to an attribute score. So very, very important for you to remember that this is not bioessentialism. What this is game balancing. If you could have all of the advantages and traits and abilities that an elf has for an elf fighter or an elf magic user or whatever, you would never have the incentive to play a human fighter or a human magic user or whatnot. It's a balancing to make the choice of a character race to be a meaningful choice. There is some give and there is some takeaway when you choose, when you make that choice. And that's the purpose behind it. It is not to say that there is supremacy of any or one race over another or whatnot. It is a game mechanic to balance the game out. All right, so I will get off my little soapbox there and get back to the attribute score, the character creation, sorry. So you can see the level limitations, again, based on ability score. So a cleric's wisdom, if a hill dwarf is a cleric, they have a wisdom of 18. They can be an 11th level cleric or an 8th level. If they have an 18 strength, they could be an 8th level fighter. Mountain dwarves might be a little bit different. Looking at an 18, they could be 9th level and 11th level. So the mountain dwarves can be a slightly higher level than hill dwarves when it comes to fighting and such. The other thing I like about this here is that it does put their height and weight calculations and age calculations right here in the player's handbook. That was different than AD&D First Edition, so this is already, in that aspect, a better presentation of information. Like I said, I'm going to focus on those differences. So talking about classes, we'll see. We'll take a look here if they have all of the classes listed. You have Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Cavalier, Mage, Savant, and Mont Blanc. That might be just related to the Grey Elf. So I'm going to find the larger chart that has all of the character classes listed, and I'll go through those as well. So let's get away from the very specific ability modifiers and everything for the various races. Here we go. So here is the list of all of the classes available by race. So you have a Bard with a subclass of Jester. You have Cavalier with a subclass of Paladin. You have Cleric with the subclasses of Druid and Mystic. You have a Fighter with the subclasses of Barbarian and Ranger. You have the Mage with subclasses of Illusionist and Savant. And Thief with the subclasses of Acrobat and Montbanc. I think that's how you pronounce that. And here we go with multi-classing rules. I'm not a big fan of multi-classing. I do have to dig into this deeper to see if there's any real advantage to doing it. It's usually an experience point sap, and you're probably better off not going multi-classed. Unless you have a very small party and you need the flexibility of that, then fine. So taking a look at classes, so changing classes. Human characters may, once in their careers, switch from one class to another. Barbarians may never change classes. So there are some interesting class rules here as far as making changes and such. A thief becoming a thief acrobat does not count as changing a class for this purpose. So yeah, you might be able to switch into different subclasses without it counting as changing an absolute class. When they talk about changing classes, I'm going to go from a fighter to a thief would be a class change. A fighter to a ranger is not going to be a class change. That's just a shift. However, if you're a barbarian, you can shift to a fighter or ranger because, or anything else, because a barbarian is less of a profession than it is a lifestyle and upbringing. So that's not something that you can just change per se. So anyway, Bard, we will go into some of the ability scores and everything. And that's another thing that I noticed with this here. So Bard's a good example to look at. So Bards, they could go up through level 11, and then everything beyond that is a different scale of what they gain along the way. Verbal patter is something that Bards have that is unique to this game as far as I know. All right, I've not seen it described this way in any other game system that I currently have. So Adventures Dark and Deep with the Bard, slightly different look at it. So they have verbal patter, and I'm just going to abbreviate this really quickly for you. Verbal patter gives them these various abilities, right? So they can gain your attention. That's what attend is. They can distract you. They can cause distrust within you. They can entertain you. they can inspire you, and they can instill upon you trust, right? So these are all influences of their verbal pattern. How they are delivering that to you is, is potentially different, right? So they have a base level of attend, inspire, entertain, distract, distrust, and trust. Um, and then charisma adjustments for those are based on having, a fairly high charisma, as you can see. So you don't get adjustments to that from charisma until level 16. All right, and then in that case, it's only a 5% bonus for attend and a 10% bonus for distract, entertain, and distrust. You're really looking to have somewhere along the lines of, a 17, 18, which would be great because then you're starting to get across all three. You're starting to gain an ability to enhance your trust that you can use. They have spell use and series of bard spells here. So initial spells like altering animal, alter plant, bless, climb, cure animal wounds, false trail. I'm sorry, jump, sharp note, sleep, wizard lock. So these are initial bard abilities or spells. From B, they have calmness, disgust, dry, friends, haunting dream, message, perception, read spell, resist cold, and ventriloquism. Uh, I'm looking at some of these here, and I'm kind of I don't understand why they can alter animal or plant, um, or cure animal wounds. To me, that's not really a bard, ability. Uh, so it's kind of weird to me that those would be in there. I kind of like what Bliss B is presenting here, as far as friendship and perception and messaging and haunted dreams and such. So I would, as a game master, I would look at some of these and say that doesn't make much sense. I get that bard abilities should have lore, absolutely. They should have read language. Um, I don't know why a bard needs to hide in shadows, um, or listen to doors necessarily, or have the sleight of hand could be like only when dealing with cards and such. Um, I wouldn't necessarily have it dealing with stealing, or any other kind of sleight of hand ability there. I mean, even looking at this, I would modify certain spells or certain abilities or options and everything as a game master, and you might very well choose to do the same as well. Jester is a subclass of Bard, and Jester is unique to this. All right, and so we'll take a look at unique to Adventures Dark and Deep. I'm actually running my characters through like a carnival kind of scenario, my players, I should say, in a carnival-like scenario in a Castles and Crusades campaign, using a module written by Joseph Block, and jesters are a core feature of this particular adventure, and so I'm going to become very, very familiar with these as well. So I'm looking forward to it. But here you have jesters. They have a verbal pattern ability as well, and they have to assure, demean, attend, question, entertain, distract, distrust, create a second look, befuddle, trust and value, and enrage. So they have these abilities here, and they go into more detail over here. So I'm going to definitely take a look at those Now they have tumbling and performing abilities. All right, so evasion, falling, balance, fire breathing, juggling, knife throwing, and sword swallowing. So very, very appropriate skills uh, for the jumbling, for the jester class here. And so I see better alignment there with the character concept than I did with the bard having some of those thieving abilities. Then we go to Cavaliers. Cavalier is not unique to this. Cavalier came out of Unearthed Arcana in AD&D First Edition, and originally from a Dragon magazine. Um, I prefer to call them knights. I think it's a better term for them, but I'm not going to go into huge detail here. Um, Paladins are a subclass of Cavalier, so that's somewhat interesting. And they've been around. I've seen them as a subclass of cleric, and I've seen them as a class onto their own. Um, putting them as a subclass to knight may make some sense. I would make them a prestige class, so something that you have to be a fifth level cavalier before you could become a first level paladin. But again, that's just a preference. Then we go into clerics. Unlike OD&D, clerics do start with a spell at first level, and they go up level fairly quickly actually. 1500, 3000, 6000, 13,000, and so on. So fairly quickly. Druid is a subclass of cleric. I want to get to some of those new ones and spend a little bit more time. So Vades. Vades is an interesting one. So Vades is a druid of exceptional experience and power. So you don't become a Vades until 16th level, all right, as a druid. So this is absolutely a prestige class, right? And then once you become a Vades, now you'll run a different track along here, and they're obviously going to have a significant change up in their abilities that they have. So their spell casting, they can memorize and cast spells as they could when they were grand druids of 15th level. They do not, however, have any bonus levels of spells. They can merely memorize 6 spells of each spell level. Immunity to poison they gain, longevity and vigor, so they're going to become, they could be as much as 200 extra years of life to them, depending on, let's see, the number equals to 10 times their current level. So every time they gain a level, they gain another 10 years of life. So that's pretty extensive. Now, Vades start to gain the ability to access the planes, the elemental planes, and so they're planes travelers, which makes a lot of sense. All right, so that's really really cool, and that's something that I was looking for to see how do they actually change these things up. All right, so a mystic. A mystic is an initiate of an inner mystery tradition that seeks direct communion with the multiverse and other in order to achieve enlightenment. Mystics do start at first level, so they're even though they fell under a subclass of cleric, if I recall correctly. They fell under the subclass of cleric, and yet they're still they start at level 1 and work their way up from level 1. And they can create scrolls. They do have spell casting ability, meditation, pain management, asceticism, live a life of self-denial and poverty. He cannot retain more than a certain amount of. So they have a vow of silence at ninth level. Uh, Discipline at higher levels. Fighters will kind of skip over much of this. They do have weapon specialization and exceptional strength that other classes do not get. Barbarian is a subclass of fighter, and they have a D12. So still, they start with a D12. They have required weapon proficiencies, multiple attacks per round. I'd like to see how they've really rebalanced the barbarian, so I will do possibly a comparison between the two, because even though the barbarian was kind of fun to play in AD&D First Edition, it kind of capped out at level 10ish, where you'd be better off being a fighter than a barbarian at level 10. So they were very much front weighted on the lower levels. Ranger level here, so Rangers, they still get the 2 hit die at first level, which has always been a big advantage for Rangers. I want to specifically see weapon specializations. They won't be able to double specialize. If a bow is chosen, the character can count any target from 6 to 30 feet away as being point blank range. Targets in point blank range are hit with a bonus of +2 to hit and damage. All right. And are further hit for double damage. Thus, a bow, so it makes them super, super powerful, like a freaking howitzer when they're specialized in the bow and at point blank range. It makes them one-shot snipers. They're unbelievably powerful, with a bow in that point blank range. So that's something to remember with them. That Rangers with a bow in point blank range are devastating when you're creating adventures with them. The Savant. The Savant is a specialist in knowledge, divination, and detection. At higher levels, their knowledge of all things arcane give them significant prowess when dealing with creatures from other planes of existence. So that's something I'm noticing, like a lot of these subclasses all have to deal with planar travel and interaction with. And I think we're getting to Thief, and we'll get to the Mont Blanc. Let's see what actually that is. And I've seen that before. I've seen that in other systems as well. Thief Acrobat, which was one of my favorite prestige classes to do, and it's still handled as a prestige class here. You have to go through level 5 as a thief, and then you shift over to Thief Acrobat, which I had done back in my AD&D days. Let's see, a Mountebank. A Mountebank is a subclass of thief and a veteran con man and huckster, relying more on his skills of misdirection and confusion than the physical pilfering, but not interested in many of the more traditional thieving arts as well. Mountebanks also have a small amount of knowledge of magic, which they use to aid in their confidence games. All right, so they're they're more like swindlers kind of thing. They can disguise, they can performing. So they have performing and prestidigitation. They have spellcasting ability, alchemy, thieves' cant, and verbal patter. So Yeah, they're more like con men, more so than even though they do have some, pickpocketing and sleight of hand and juggling and knife throwing, um, they're more aligned with confidence games, kind of, scams, kind of things. They do have some alchemy ability where they can create medicines or magic potions. That's interesting. Their verbal patter, I really like that. I really like that ability. And it's something that I'm not used to seeing, or I haven't come across that a lot. So, I give Joseph Block a lot of credit here in having this, integrated in to some of these classes where they really do make sense. And we see many of the same things though, right? So question is a little bit different. By using the ability, the mind block causes the audience to question something that they had been hereto known, uh, or sorry, so like kind of like a deception kind of spell. Um, Value, the mind block attempts to make his audience revere and generally have a high opinion of a particular person or thing. Very cool. Alignment, you have your 9 categories of alignment. Secondary skills, so there are secondary skills in this. Optional rules starting secondary skills, rules for using those skills, and we'll just do a very, very brief skim through of these. So you have alchemy, ambush, animal, training and handling, um, armor making, artistry, blacksmithing, bullying, business, charioteer, construction. None of these are going to be the equivalent of like a class ability, but they're just added to give some extra flavor, maybe some modifiers, and just allow you to do things that are more unique to your actual character. So they're role playing enhancers as well. Um, let's see. So healing, you can heal up to 2 points with the healing. Um, yeah, I was curious to see how much you could actually heal per day using the healing ability. Hunting usually involves collecting and gathering various things in nature. Jewelry, judgment. To detect others are attempting to deceive them. All right. Poisons and scholarship. Suborning allows a character to blackmail, bribe, or influence and convince. Yeah. So a lot of these things are just like added instant flavor, for your characters. They have XP cost that'll cost you to buy those, those particular things. They're based on charisma. So if charisma is one of your main or your primary, then it costs 5,000. For all others, it's 8,000. So they do seem to key in on what your actual class features are, and then whether or not it's something that will cost you more or less depending upon that. So that's pretty cool. Um, they show some skills and how fast and how many items can be produced in a month. That's interesting. Then we get into social class. And again, this is role playing flavor and such. So you can roll social classes and you get historical and in game examples of what would fall within those social classes. Monthly expenses based on class, literacy rates based on social class and character classes, family traits and modifiers, so you can go into the family backgrounds and birth order and starting money, um, age by character, class and race. Like I said, very nice that it's in the player's handbook and not in the, not having those things moved to the Dungeon Master's Guide. Here you have age categories and then their impact on the ability score adjustments. And then we get into naming, right? And so you have your naming of character, and it gives you some examples like in English and French, men's names, women's names, Norse, men's and women's, Eastern European, so surnames that you want to go into, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of tips and such that you can look to see, naming your characters. And then equipment. And like I said, I'm not going to go into any detail over equipment. I almost misspoke and said retail. I like the fact that there's a lot of, sorry about that. I like to mention that, musical instruments, and this is probably the largest selection of musical instruments I've seen in any RPG. So really good bonus for bards or jesters or whatever, to see costs for various items here and how much they weigh, and just adds a little bit more flavor for them to select beyond a fiddle or a flute or the very common things. And I'm not going to spend time with movement. Gaining levels, training optional rule. I was a real strict adherent to training in AD&D First Edition, and I probably won't spend that kind of time, on it, where they have to seek out a master, somebody at least 2 levels above them. It costs, here it says cost 1,500 per level, being advanced to. 1 week spent time in training. No other activities can be done during that week's time. That's all AD&D First Edition, and it's I found that it's not as necessary to do that, so I wouldn't do that. I'm kind of leaning towards. I am kind of leaning towards the just having it where, as long as you have some time that you can rest and contemplate, talking about. It might take 1 day per level that you're going to attain to spend just, collecting your ideas and everything like that. But after a certain point, it doesn't even take you that. You just all of a sudden just know it. The whole point of experience points gained is that you're typically gaining your experience points from actively using your skills. And so when you're ready to go up a level, it doesn't make sense that you have to train again to do what you already accomplished in gaining that experience to begin with. So I wouldn't use that particular optional rule. I'd probably just let the characters, you sleep overnight, you wake up the next morning, and you're the next level, kind of thing. So that's, that I think is a more appropriate way, makes more sense, and it kind of streamlines the game process of running the game and everything. You could focus on actually adventuring and not on downtime while the characters are training to go up a level. So that's the overview for creating characters. You can see that there's a lot of new things in here, or different things in here from AD&D First Edition. And again, this is not meant to be a retro clone. This is meant to be the next step beyond what AD&D First Edition did. So, in theory, if Gary Gygax created a new edition of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, this is what Joseph Block believes. Based on Gary Gygax's own writings, this is what he believes he probably would have created if he was still at the helm of TSR and still at the helm of directing where Advanced Dungeons and Dragons went in its newest edition. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and always appreciate your comments and questions that are in the comments section. If you hadn't subscribed, please consider subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen or at a convention sometime soon. You'll have a great rest of your afternoon, and as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care.